Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna. My obeisances, glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Welcome to
Thank
this.
you.
Welcome to Gopal Bhatta Prabhu. Is our chairman of the GBC Strategic Planning Team. Is also the senior co-chair of the GBC Organizational Development Committee. He's also a number of other marvelous things.
Yeah, Hare Krishna.
And today we have him here to celebrate, to meditate, to reflect on Srila Prabhupada's legacies, especially because we are celebrating ISKCON Incorporation Day. In July 1966 in New York City, Srila Prabhupada officially incorporated ISKCON. And so every year we celebrate that anniversary. Last year, the GBC Strategic Planning Team organized a series of talks on the 7 purposes with which ISKCON was registered and incorporated. Please visit our channel on YouTube, and you will see a series of top-notch speakers, each speaking on one of these 7 purposes. So today, we'll look at the past, we'll look at the present, and we'll look also into the future of Srila Prabhupada's movement. So, Gopal Bhatta Prabhu, you have been in the movement practically from the beginning. Now it's almost 50 years or more. You are serving in ISKCON.
Yes.
So what are your observations? What are your reflections, especially on these days, through these lenses of the incorporation of ISKCON?
Okay, so I think our time together is an introduction to this topic. And as you and I have spoken, we're not sure how many sessions we'll create in the course of the next month and a half. So it's like an introduction. And we're looking at Srila Prabhupada's legacies, what he gave us, the importance of that, and what over time, over several sessions, we'll talk about the condition of some of these legacies and what's been done from a timeline point of view. We will spend a little bit of time talking about the days during when Srila Prabhupada was with us. We'll spend a little bit more time with what's happened since. We'll talk about some of the elements of the current. And then we'll look into our future as best as we can tell, what some of the possibilities, probabilities are about the future of these legacies. So that's the timeline. And when we say the future, I think it's important to imagine the Vaishnavas of 200 years from now, 300 years from now, or more, as well as the Vaishnavas in between now and that faraway future. In one of the important documents and presentations that the GBC Organizational Development Committee put out, it was called the 4 Generations, and I think that we're going to spend some time with that in one of our sessions. But in that, we used Srila Prabhupada as our first generation, the Srila Prabhupada's disciples as second generation, Srila Prabhupada's grand disciples as third generation, and the great grand disciples, meaning the disciples of Srila Prabhupada's disciples, fourfold forward, we'll call that the fourth generation. Sometimes people call Srila Prabhupada's disciples the first generation, and then they look at Srila Prabhupada's grand disciples and call them the second generation, but really Prabhupada is first generation. There's a lot of different gifts that Srila Prabhupada gave us. And to organize a discussion on it, we're going to put them into three primary thought buckets. In legacy number one is Srila Prabhupada's books. Srila Prabhupada actually put the books into the BBT and kept them as separate from ISKCON. He wanted them particularly and especially protected. So what's the condition of those books when we look out into the future? It's actually pretty good. In all of these years, a lot of books have been distributed. And since the internet, which now has even stronger capacity to keep things for the long term, we have Srila Prabhupada's books proliferated on the internet as well. Now, there are some issues to this legacy. There's a lot of controversy. It's actually currently rising up, but there's been controversy. How much editing should have been done or should not have been done? And, hopefully that gets reconciled one day. I don't know if it ever will. And
I'm not so positive. I'm not so optimistic, but
yeah,
hoping and pray doesn't cost anything.
The hoping and praying doesn't cost anything. Yeah, that's good. The BBT, structurally speaking, is not terribly strong. Yet there is some strength. The BBT owns the copyrights of Srila Prabhupada's books. And within the various divisions worldwide of the BBT, they're connected by way of a license on those rights to publish. So there's some, what you might call hierarchy. Yet at the same time, the BBT is got some similarities to ISKCON. They're united in spirit, generally speaking. The BBT trustees and directors, they're united in spirit for the most part. But structurally speaking, and for a setup for the long term, a lot of work needs to be done on the BBT. But
and of course, there is also the issue, like you said, the BBT owns the rights, but that's not forever.
Yes, that's a very, very important point. The copyrights by way of law, and this is not just a U.S. law, this is copyright agreements across the planet for the most part. The Srila Prabhupada's books will go into the public domain sometime in the future. And I'm not exactly sure when. It could be as early as 20 years from now. Actually, I should find out. Let me even make remember, this is a little bit of an informal introduction. So I'm going to find out. We need to know that, but I think it could be as little as 20 years that then anyone would be able to publish Srila Prabhupada's books. Possibly. We'll look into that issue. Anyway, largely, Srila Prabhupada's books are very important. And Srila Prabhupada's books are generally secure from a legacy point of view. And why is that so important? Because people who are running ISKCON 100 years from now, they have to have Srila Prabhupada's books to be able to do that. And if ISKCON veers off a path and becomes a something different than ISKCON, at least we have Srila Prabhupada's books. And somebody can pick these books up and become a Vaishnava. Okay. In these three legacies that I'm giving you, I believe they're in order of importance. So books are the most important. The second is something that actually has been a little bit overlooked by the institutions of ISKCON, and for that matter, even the institution of the BBT. And if we call Srila Prabhupada's books the book Bhagavat, not if, that's Prabhupada's called them, the book Bhagavat, then we take a look at the person Bhagavat. In other words, Srila Prabhupada. And again, let's go out 100 or 200 years from now, and there's a devotee wishing to be a devotee, and maybe ISKCON's in good shape, maybe it's not, it's good, whatever. He's got Srila Prabhupada's books. Now, if he also has, or she, of course, has all the stories of Srila Prabhupada's life, in other words, the accumulation of the meaning of acharya, one who showed by example, and all of these stories accumulated together, this will greatly enhance the faith and the position of that devotee 300, 200, 100 years from now. So what is the condition of this legacy? Well, there's these great souls that have taken the time, in many instances, devoted big chunks of their life to documenting Srila Prabhupada's life. We can start with a major effort that Satsvarup Maharaj made, which was also the effort of the BBT, and that is the Lilamrita. And that book, being a BBT book, is in the position of security that we just spoke about with regard to the BBT. And it's a very wonderful book. I'm not sure how many devotees have actually read that book. I think it's a fair amount. But if there's any listener to this tape that has not read that book, I encourage you to get it.
And probably you are talking about the full edition, not the abridged.
Yeah. Why would there be an abridged? I don't know. I guess we're in the abridged phase of humanity, where shorter is better.
I guess it was for mass distribution.
Yeah.
I mean, one book on Srila Prabhupada for street distribution, but definitely the whole biography is much larger.
Yeah, and it's the whole biography that we would recommend that the devotees of ISKCON read if they haven't. And maybe it's something that they ought to read more than once. We have Siddhanta Prabhu, who's accumulated over 400 devotees, traveling the world, spending 30 years of his life capturing 400 devotees' memories of Srila Prabhupada. There is Harisari Prabhu's
capturing on video, just
on video. Yes. Oh, more than just on video, though. He has taken the memories and moved them into not just a pure transcription, but a main point type of document. So we have the books of these memories also.
Mhm.
We have Harisari Prabhu's Transcendental Diaries. We have the books, the Shruti Kirti Prabhu book. I'm not sure if it's books or one book, but he's got these beautiful little chapters of events. Both of these devotees being Srila Prabhupada's personal servants for an extended period of time. There's Shyama Sundar Prabhu's book. There's Jamuna Devi's book. Giriraj Maharaj has written several books. And I might add this most recent book that he has written, which actually is a BBT publication, is I'll Build You a Temple, the Juhu Story. What a book. I mean, I would encourage our audience to get this book and read this book, because it's not just about the Juhu story. It's about Srila Prabhupada. Kurma Prabhu wrote a fantastic book, Transcendental Adventure. Yeah. The story of Srila Prabhupada going to Australia. And actually, it was one of the most well-researched books on Srila Prabhupada. There are other books. Burijan Prabhu has written his memoirs of Prabhupada. And let me just fall at the feet of other devotees that have done books on Srila Prabhupada.
I can mention a few if you like.
You go ahead, mention.
Well, there is Srila Prabhupada and his disciples in Germany.
Okay.
There is also a book by Balimardan Prabhu on preaching in the Pacific Rim.
Yeah.
Mahamaya Devi Dasi, Srila Prabhupada is coming, about Srila Prabhupada in Mayapur. Then we even have a book which I don't think it's translated yet in English. It's an Italian book of Srila Prabhupada in Rome by Supta Vigra Prabhu. Then we have Srila Prabhupada in Venezuela. We have the famous book, Here Comes the Sun, Srila Prabhupada in
yes, Here
in
Comes
England.
Wonderful by Ranchor Prabhu. Yeah.
There's a book on Srila Prabhupada in Malaysia and Indonesia. There is the book on the beginning of the movement in South Africa, which also includes Srila Prabhupada's activity. So
let's take a look at this.
And sorry, I can't stop myself. There is also the recent book by Yogeshwar Prabhu.
Oh, Yogeshwar, yeah. I should have mentioned him. Actually, I recently spoke to him about this. Yeah, also, yeah. So,
and Guru Das Prabhu.
Okay, yes, right. So by way of your help, we have offended less devotees by not mentioning them. So now, if we haven't mentioned somebody's effort, once again, we fall at your feet for the sacrifices you made to make this effort. Let's take a look at the legacy, the condition of the legacy. Only recently, in a discussion with Siddhanta Prabhu, did he finally get to store all of his work up on the Amazon cloud with the potential of having it there for the long term. Otherwise, all of his work was just simply on a hard drive on his desk. And it's owned by a 501c3, a small nonprofit entity. His thoughts is that upon his demise, it will go under the control of his daughter. And she's a lovely Vaishnava, a Vaishnavi, and she'll do what she can with all of that material. Same kind of similar situation with Harisari Prabhu. It'll go to his daughter. She'll do what she can with it. Other devotees, they haven't really thought about what's going to happen to their literatures. And they're not necessarily secure at all. And there's no institutional support to this legacy. These are devotees that are entrepreneurial, decided from their heart that they needed to write about Srila Prabhupada. They put out their heart into the form of a book. Many of them don't have significant financial resources, so they need the income from those books. They don't have the ability to invest into strong translations of those books. So much of the material that we have has not gone out to the Spanish speaking, the Russian speaking. Some of it has, by the way, but not extensively. What to speak of other languages. And, you know, what do we have in ISKCON? Maybe 50% of the devotees speak English or something, whatever the number would be. The rest of the devotees don't have access to this.
Maybe less than that. Maybe less than that.
Okay. And
big swath of ISKCON major places like Bangladesh and Russia and China, the devotees don't generally speak English.
yeah. We have the statement from Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, where he stated with sadness in his heart that there were numerous biographies written about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, but they were lost over time. They were lost over time. And only two, the Chaitanya Charitamrita and the Chaitanya Bhagavat, survived. These books, from a long-term point of view, they're actually under threat of surviving the long haul. Plus, because there's been no institutional support, there's no money to get everything done on a virtual book and on an ebook. Most of these are not ebooks. Therefore, their access is more limited. Karma Prabhu, as an example, his book has not been published for years. And the BBT feels that there's no market for the book, so they have no plans to republish that book. So it's basically not accessible. There's no ebook on it. It's already starting to fade, so to speak. And actually, we have a project that is starting a dialogue with these authors so that we can possibly put all of this together in an organization that is designed to support and keep this work long haul. So if we take a look at the importance of these literatures, and they're critically important, and we fall at the feet of the people that have done them and worked on them, but then at the same time we say so much more work could be done and would be done, and the work that has been done must be protected. What we have to say is Srila Prabhupada's legacy number 2 is in a somewhat threatened position. You know, the materialists, they look at animal life and other types of life forms. So they take, for instance, birds. And you have some birds that there's plenty of birds flying around of that species, and so they're unthreatened. You have other birds that are, got a questionable thing, whether they're producing enough, they might go extinct, but they're okay, they're just like somewhat threatened. Then you have other entities that are highly threatened and could possibly go extinct, okay?
Yeah, they use the expression endangered species.
Endangered species. So Srila Prabhupada's legacy number 2 has got some danger to it, actually. And now we take a look at legacy number 3, ISKCON. And again, this is an introduction. We're not diving deep into it, but this talk that you and I are having is going to be shown on Srila Prabhupada's Incorporation Day. And ISKCON is the best organization that's ever been created in all of history. Okay. Well, let's start with Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. How fast did that organization, 64 temples, just dissolve? And yes, there are members of the Gaudiya Math kind of thing that are doing significant preaching and are carrying on the generational element from Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati to some of his disciples, and now they are preaching. And there's no disrespect to the efforts that they're making. But as an organization, you know, it's just non-existent.
I mean, you're saying, just to clarify, you're saying as the collective number of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur followers, there's no such a thing as a unified organization.
Unified, yeah. So now we take a look at one devotee. He happens to be a GBC. And I remember him saying, this was about 3 years ago or so. I probably can't say it as eloquently as he said it. He said, if we take a look at the dissolution of the Gaudiya Math as an entity, as a unified entity, this all occurred in a matter of years, 2 years, 3 years. They were already then throwing lawsuits at each other, etc. Excuse me. What's happening with ISKCON is same thing is what he was saying. But it's all happening very slowly over the course of multiple generations. But it's dissolving also. So what is the status of ISKCON? We have 50 years, largely 50 years of our second generation, Srila Prabhupada's disciples, and they've done their best to hold ISKCON together and keep ISKCON moving forward. We have the instructions. You know, some of Srila Prabhupada's instructions are like very, very important, but he only mentioned them a few times. And you and I both well know those, you know, the skeleton comments that Srila Prabhupada made, that I have given you a skeleton of ISKCON and you must fill it out.
The skeleton of the building, yes.
Yes, the skeleton of a building. So actually, there's a lot of work that has not been done. A lot of work that has not been done. And you have certain areas, certain yatras that are legally protected in the countries that they're in, and have language in the charters that tie them to the GBC. And you have other areas that have no legal tie-in whatsoever. And then you have varying degrees. The GBC is supposed to be the ultimate managing authority of this movement, and yet they have largely relational power only, although in some cases they have something more than that. Some people seriously question the gradual decline of spiritual standards in ISKCON. We have a dynamic, and this is one of the things, Kaunteya Prabhu, that you really worked on with our dear friend Hare Krishna Prabhu from Russia, and myself. And then you make a very wonderful presentation, the 3 ecosystems. which portrays the element of ISKCON, the element of guru, the guru shishya, and the element of social. And, these have to be in alignment. So are they in alignment will be one of the questions that we'll speak about. So there's many more wonderful things that have occurred in ISKCON in these 50 years, and there's a lot of weakness. And if we were to take and analyze all the potential paths that would allow ISKCON to become something other than what Srila Prabhupada would want it to be, well, we would have to say that there are multiple paths that could be taken for that to happen. So, is ISKCON strong enough that 50 years from now, there'll be an ISKCON? Yeah, probably. But will it be the ISKCON that Srila Prabhupada actually wants? So when we take a look at this legacy, we have to say that actually there's a fair amount of threat. And the threat is not always perceivable. It's not always understood. And because we don't take the time to think about how it will survive over the long haul. So all in all, this is an intro to the topic of Srila Prabhupada's legacies. Let me finish. You've spent a significant portion of your life dealing with these matters. And, I've been talking largely, but I'd like to, this is an intro. This is a little bit informal. I'd like to hear from you, your general thoughts on this topic.
Well, in our previous conversation in preparation of this program, you also mentioned you wanted to talk about the status of ISKCON's growth or development according to the three broad phases of organizational development. The pioneer, the administrative or rational phase, and then the integration phase. Maybe you'd like to say something about that.
No, you say. Because when we have our further talks, that's going to be one thing that we're going to be looking to you to speak, because you've developed that thought process. So you speak.
Any organization, maybe commercial, maybe religious, goes through different phases of growth, of development, and researchers have identified a number of phases. Now, some people talk about 5, some people talk about 6. We started introducing the basic format of 3 phases. One is a pioneer phase in which the movement or the company is very young. Basically, everybody knows everybody else. There's a sense of family spirit. There's a lot of improvisation because there are no clear policies or legislations or constitutions, and everybody basically does everything.
And it's a lot of fun.
It's a lot of fun, but of course there are also dangers because there's a lack of there's no institutional memory because the institution doesn't have a memory, and there is also a great chance to make a lot of mistakes. There's a lot of room for autocracy. So yeah, it's a fun time. It's a time of discovery. It's a time of invention. It's a time of breaking barriers, trailblazing, path finding, and so on. At one point, the company or the movement or the institution needs to move also to what is called rational phase, which is also called administrative phase, because the assets needs to be protected, the legal aspects needs to be also looked into, and people cannot just go on improvising. There is now an institutional memory, what works, what doesn't work. There should be some standards of legal protection, And so there is a phase in which the movement or the organization clarifies those things, those policies, those protocols, those procedures, and so on. Just to give an example, at the very beginning, to take sannyas in ISKCON, you basically go up to Srila Prabhupada and may say yes or no. That was the protocol. Now there is a much more detailed procedure. There are age limits. There are a number of forms to be filled. A number of considerations, and
five-year
necessity.
waiting period.
Waiting period. No, people are candidates, and they're in the waiting period. Sometimes 5, sometimes Anyway, you get the point. It's a much more complex and established procedure, and it's good that it's like that. Then, now many organizations, including religious organizations, they die. They never really get to the administrative level, or they get to the administrative level, they become very stagnant. They stop attracting new people. So the vast majority of religious movements just die within the first 3-4 generations. That's like what the sociologists of religions explain, the historians. Now, those who survive, they have a chance to get to the phase which is called integration. In other words, you connect with the original purity, with the original spirit of sincerity, enthusiasm, abnegation, sacrifice, but in a more structured form, in a more legally protected shape. So you have experience and enthusiasm at the same time. You have maturity, but you have a drive for growth at the same time. That's a very coveted level, the integration phase. There is also an geographical integration, cultural integration. And of course, one says the secret to reach that is through education. When every single person, every single responsibility in ISKCON will have to go through standard training, will have to go through a certification of different positions of leadership, and so on and so forth. And by the way, let me just mention that just this morning, we completed the GBC College course for group leaders, the online part in China. So we had the 2 GBCs, His Holiness Giridhari Swami Maharaj and His Grace Chandrasekhar Prabhu. We had about 30 or so students who have studied online for 11 months. And today was the
graduation day?
No, it's not really the graduation, but it's the completion of the online part. They'll have a residential in October, and that will include the graduation. But the spirit, the idea is that for every position of responsibility, there should be a corresponding training and even ongoing training. This is our part of the aspect of the rational and of the integration phase.
Yeah. So very good. We're going to cover that in more detail. We're going to cover those 3 ecosystems. We're going to cover the 4 generations. We're going to open up further dialogues to try to examine, all the wonderful and fantastic things that ISKCON has become. But we will emphasize a little bit more, okay, how secure is it for the long haul? And, we're not negative people, but it's very similar to one of the very early verses of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Reality means to be able to distinguish clearly reality, illusion. We got to really look at it seriously to consider that we have to. And one last point I'd like to make. Whatever contribution is going to be made by the 2nd generation, they had better start making that contribution very soon. I mean, I'm one of the mid-range disciples and I'm 70 years old. And yes, I have a few god brothers that are older, god sisters that are older, and there's a few that are younger. But for the most part, call it 10 years max. That's it. So, you know, the third generation, they are already largely moving into control of this organization. And whatever contributions Srila Prabhupada's disciples are going to make, they better make it soon. So we have to keep that in mind too.
Yeah, the most recent 5 GBCs were all third generation devotees.
That's correct. Yeah. All right. So that's our intro. We're good.
Thank you, Gopal Bhatta Prabhu.
Yeah. Thank you. Glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Bo.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.